Okay, good afternoon, and thank you so much for keeping time. While we wait for the rest of the team to join us, I know the feeder team is sending um, reminders to the people that have to come in. I just want to confirm with our comms team, are all the panelists on call? Okay, good evening. Oh, good evening. No, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Well, depending from where you're joining us from. Welcome to our webinar on traditional norms, culture practices, and their influences on GBV. I know very many of us have had gender-based violence and how culture often influences how our culture perceptions, our community perceptions of gender-based violence. So that is what this discussion ideally is about today. We'll be exploring some of the positive things that culture can contribute to in terms of sorry about that. So we'll be exploring a conversation on how culture influences gender-based violence, both on the positive side and also on the negative side. And we hope that by the end of this webinar, we would have found recommendations, action points, commitments on how we can actually use culture to positively advance promote gender equality in our spaces, and also to create safe spaces for both men and women. My name is Joan Amito. I am a legal officer working with FIDA Uganda, and I am very happy to moderate this particular webinar today. So, a little bit about why we are having the webinar. Um, you'll very well understand that GBV actually remains a pervasive challenge in many communities, and not just Western Uganda, but across Uganda as well. We hold our culture very valuable to us. So we're having this conversation because while we have cultural perceptions that have negatively impacted us, we want to believe that there are those positive ones. And how can the community, how can we as FIDA Uganda, and how can informal justice actors actually use the positive norms to create safe spaces for men and women? So our central discussion today will be around cultural norms on how they can protect communities and how they can contribute to gender justice within our different attitudes. So the people that we have on call are very unique people that have extensively worked with cultural institutions, that have extensively engaged with cultural leaders. Some of them are traditional healers, so you'll be hearing their perspectives on different um, on the different things regarding this. Before I introduce my panel, I'd just like to quickly send a shout out to Bird for the World project, the project that is sponsoring this all. They have so graciously catered for the webinar. And if you do not know, FIDA Uganda implements a project called Bread for the World in Luengo district that is tailored to enhancing access to holistic legal aid services for vulnerable women and men and children. So the project entails operating a legal aid clinic, which is in Luengo, conducting different activities, including mobile legal aid clinics, mediations, and such and such and such. Um, so that is our contribution really in Western Uganda in terms of advancing access to justice. In terms of setting the context for where our participants are coming from, we're looking at a space that has diverse cultures, that is next to the cattle corridor. So best believe that the conversations are going to be so rich. With me, I have four panelists that are well versed with how culture has actually intertwined with how we've been advancing GBV, and all of them are actually champions of gender equality. So we will have such a fruitful discussion. I have been told that Doreen is with one of the speakers, so I think we're going to move on. We have the District Community Development Officer of Luengo District, Mr. Mazinga. Joseph is on call, and he'll be telling us about how local government can support the culture institutions, but also support FIDA Uganda in terms of how they're implementing work to advance gender equality. We also have on call Mr. Semandaya Sin, who is the chairperson of the Traditional Healers Association in Luengo District, who has extensive knowledge on how traditional healers have been creating safe spaces for women. We also have Mr. Tolino Mubezi Humphrey, who is our very own community legal volunteer on ground in Luengo district. So he will be telling us about how his work interacts largely with culture and norms and how the realities of GBV on ground really are. And then we'll also be listening in from our legal officer in Luengo district, Ms. Doreen Nawata Grace, who will also be highlighting FIDA's work on ground. So now that we know who we're going to listen to, what the discussions are going to entail, I'm just going to give a quick overview of how the webinar is going to run. We have already had the objectives of the meeting. We'll have opening remarks from each speaker. They will take 5 minutes each to introduce themselves to us so that we know exactly where they're coming from and what they'll be letting us know during the webinar. We'll have a moderated panel discussion for 50 minutes, and then the audience will be given 30 minutes to make comments, to put forward their questions that will also be answered by the panelists. And then we'll close the meeting with reflections from each of the speakers, and then a summary and a close of the um, general webinar. So that's how our 2 hours is going to look like. I would like to invite Miss Doreen to quickly, just in 2 minutes, introduce herself, and then the next speakers that are around are with her. Over to you, Doreen.
Thank you, John. I hope I can be heard. My name is Doreen Nabwato Grace, and I serve as the legal officer for FIDA Uganda here in Luengo. I joined FIDA Uganda in 2023, and I've been serving for the last 3 years. Generally, my role entails case management, advocacy, community outreaches, and each and everything that pertains to ensuring that access to justice is enhanced, especially to our vulnerable women and children. And basically, that's the work that I do. I hope I've used up the 2 minutes that have been given. Together with me is Mr. Tulina, the CLV and the chairperson for the Traditional Healers Association. So I'll be also giving them an opportunity to speak about themselves as requested. Thank you.
Yes, please,
Hope you are
Mr.
hearing
Tulina.
me. I'm
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
I'm Tulinombes Humphrey, CLV, working here in Luengo, but specifically in Chazanga sub-county. My work as a CLV is to empower women, advocate for the rights of the children, and handling cases, GBV cases, gender-based violence cases, in Luengo district as a feeder officer. And actually, I'm grateful to join this webinar session. And that's all about me. Thank you very much.
Nsanyusa okubawuliza kansubire nti buli omu ampulira. Nze Ssemandagala, ssentebe w'abasawo b'ekinnansi mu Lwengo, nga nkoze omulimu guno ku basawo b'ekinnansi okumala emyaka egy'olya ddala 12 kati, era nga nkolera mu Lwengo disitulikiti, era nga ndi mu lukulembeze omulonde yalondebwa abasawo b'ekinnansi bonna mu Lwengo disitulikiti. Nsanyuse okubeegattako mwenna olwaleero luno, mwenna wamu weewaawo, era nga mbabuuzaako nti mutya nno.
Gwebale nnyo ssebo, naffe tusanyuse okuwuliriza. Ngenda tandika nagwe. I think, Doreen, you helped me with the interpretation. My Luganda is very interesting. But my first question will go out to Mr. Yasin, the chairperson of the Traditional Healers Association. And I'm curious to know, as I know the rest of us are, within the traditional healing space, have they had of what role do they play in terms of the importance of traditional healers within the community? Why is it that people often trust traditional healers in the community?
Omugaso gwaffe ng'aba traditional healers mu community nti ffe twandibadde oba ffe tuyitibwa abasawo nga bw'owulira nti abasawo abazungu oba abasawo abaakuguka mu nzijanjaba ey'abazungu. Kati ate naffe wano mu Buganda ffe basawo abaakuguka mu nzijanjaba eya habo oba ekinnansi, tukozesa eddagala lino eryaffe erya wano. Oluusi abamu abazungu lye batamanyi naye nga ffe tugenda ku ttale okwo ne tulinoga ne tujjanjaba ebirwadde eby'enjawulo ebiba bikutte abantu wane. Naddala tulina ebirwadde byaffe ebya Afirika oba ebiri muno omwaffe mu Uganda. Kaakati ebirwadde ebyo nga ne mu bazungu olumu tebabimanyi oba nga oluusi tebabivumbuliranga ddagala, naye nga ffe bibadde bitusumbwa wano. Ebirwadde ebyo tumanyi okubijjanjaba. Bwe tumala okubijjanjaba nga tunoga eddagala eryaffe erya wano, kale kireeta omuntu okubeera nga bw'aba awonye atwesiga nnyo ng'abadde alumizibwa oba alina embeera embi. Singa aba awonye ne munogera eddagala eryo n'agenda n'alinywa oba n'alijjanyi ne limujjanjaba n'atereera, awo kyo kimuleetera okutwesiga ennyo ng'abasawo era ne batukkiririzaamu nnyo yensonga nti omulimu gwaffe gwa kujjanjaba nga tukozesa eddagala egganda ekyo ne kireeta abantu okutwesiga ennyo. That is our role.
Thank you so much, sir. And it's very clear that African communities often really trust our drugs, the ones that we get from our land, because we are the ones who know our issues. But I'm curious, we want to know, in your experience, Mr. Yassin, how do you think the different cultural beliefs that we know, how are they influencing gender-based violence within our community? Or more in the category of traditional healers, you don't have such a thing as gender-based violence.
Lwaki ekibuuzo kiri nti biki obulombolombo bwaffe bukosa butya abantu baffe oba abakyala n'abaana? Obulombolombo bwaffe obwa mu nzikiriza y'obuwangwa n'ennono kituufu mwebuli bungi nnyo obadde bukosa abakyala n'abaana okusinziira ku kalica yaffe oba ku buwangwa bwaffe, era bungi nnyo obadde bujja nga bo bakosa nti abakyala n'osanga nga banyigirizibwa nti omusajja omusanga nga mu kalica waffe balagira nti omusajja awasa abakyala oba abakyala 10 n'okusoba, naye n'omusanga nga awasa abakyala ng'abagatta n'abaleeta mu nnyumba emu n'atandika okubeera nga ye tagambwako, tasobola kuteesa na mukyala. Omukyala singa amugambako lwaki owasiza ng'agamba obuwangwa bwaffe butulagira tulina okuwasa, kati n'omusanga ng'amukuba amutulugunya, ate oluusi ne bamala bazalamu abaana olw'okuba bafunyemu obutakkaanya, n'atalabirira abaana n'amugoba nabo, oba abaana n'abamugoba nabo, n'omusanga ng'amugaa nti nze obuwangwa bwange bwaŋŋambye era naloose nga baŋŋamba oli wa kisiraani, era okuva lwe wajja ewange sifuna ssente, naye erabira oluusi nti yesiya takulina mulimu guli awo osobola kuyingiza ssente, oba n'atamanya nti emirimu oluusi gibeera gya sizono, nti emmwanyi zibala biseera, nti ebiseera emmanyiro zibaze essente lwe zibeerawo, naye n'omusanga nga ye agamba omukyala nti osanga omukyala ono yabuzizza ssente waka, ate bw'aba amugoba oluusi amuzaddemu abaana 4 oba 5, amugoba talina kantu konna kamulekedde, oluusi nga n'omukuba amukubye ate n'abaana n'abagoba. Ekirala, abasawo abaffe abakozesa eddagala lyaffe erya wano babadde tebaasoma abasinga obungi okugenda ku ssomero, badde tebagendayo nga tebaagala kusoma kubanga bo basikira busikizi ddagala nti ze mmanyi okuvumula endwadde zino, oba mmanyi okuvumula entunuka, oba mmanyi okuvumula ettalo, oba nsobola okuvumula ekikuubuuko. Kaakati eddagala eryo bw'aba alimanyi jjajjawe n'alimuyigiriza ng'alaba akuze jjajjaawe anoga eddagala awaka, naye n'aba nga mwana muto atandise okunoga eddagala eryo, ye abalaba talina mugaso lwaki agenda ku ssomero. Atandikira awo n'osanga nga lack of ignorance, nga tebayinaawo mu magezi n'akamu, nga bo ebintu babikola nga bwe babisanze. Kale bwe baba babisanze bwe batyo, tulabira ddala nga ye olw'okuba amanyi nti nno asobola afunayo ku busente, bw'ayagala okuwasa omukyala n'awasa, bw'anyiigamu n'amugoba. Kati n'osanga abaana nga tebasoma, ate bwe bagenda omugambako school fees ababuuza nze nasoma, nze nga wendi, kakati nze nga wendi, nze nasoma nga mbaddewo ebbanga lyonna. Kakati n'osanga obuzibu obw'enjawulo nti nga bakozesa enkola eyo y'obuwangwa bwaffe, bamanyi n'obutasoma obugattamu, bamanyi okutawaanya ennyo abakyala n'abaana nga baba mu school fees tebaweerera, babagoba, babakuba, babatulugunya. Awassa ono nga talina kyamuwadde ate n'addamu n'awassa omulala, n'osanga ennyumba nga kasiisira naye nga kalimu abakazi 4. Abagamba nti jjajja yagambye, abagamba nti ancestor spirits zaffe zaalagidde abeere awo amuwase, n'amukaka nga amuzannyira ku bwongo, naye ng'oluusi ye yakyagala, naye nga yeekwasa nti empewo oba kye tuyita spirits oba ancestors bajjajjaffe they have said, they have told him to do this and this. N'osanga nga babasumbuwa nga babayitira mu mbeera eyo nga balinga bakonimaani, oba nga bakozesa enkola ey'okwetuusa okweteekako okunyigiriza bannaabwe nga beetuuma kye batali tebannakiraga, naye nga according to their wish, nga okusinziira ku kye beetaaga bo. kale bwe batyo tusanze okusoomozebwa kunene era nga bayitira mu nkola zaffe okusobola okunyigiriza abantu bangi nnyo ate abantu ne batavaayo kuwaaba kubanga babeera batya babeera bagamba bwe naamuwaabira ajja kundoga mukiyita wishing he will wish me ajja kundoga bw'agamba nti ngenda kumuwaabira bw'agamba nti kamuwaabire nti nja kutta kati n'obasanga nga bali eyo banyigirizibwa babazaddemu abaana oluusi nga baana bato tebabaweerera naye kuba olw'okuba oli atya kye tuyita spirits of ancestors for us we have ghosts bateze bayita ghosts tizijja kubasumbwa zijja basuula eddalu zijja batawaanya kanoosanga nga okunyigirizibwa kungi mu bakyala n'abaana naye nga ate tebalinaako bwogerero ngaera tebalina gye basobola kuwaaba weewaawo.
Briefly, for our international community, he was speaking about the different forms of violence, including wife beating, and how most of this really, in turn, have a ripple effect on how maybe the kids are not maintained for. But because we have people that have joined us that do not understand Luganda, I will request Doreen to be giving us the different interpretations from what we are hearing from the traditional healer, because it's also important and very pertinent to this conversation. Doreen, in about 2 minutes, could you please translate what Mr. Yassin has so far told us regarding the question that was asked to him?
Mr. Yassin says that indeed their norms have perpetuated gender-based violence in Luengo. For example, there's people or men that will marry several women and maybe put them in one single household, and they do not want to be advised on what to do. So oftentimes they beat the women, and because most of them are illiterate, they also neglect to educate their children. They tend to neglect their children, and as such, that the rights of the children are violated, and also that every time they actually go ahead to inflict violence on the victims are always in fear to report because they do not want to be bewitched, and yet many of them are actually con men. They are not really traditional healers in their sense as a traditional healers association. That was basically it.
Thank you so much, Doreen. I have a few more questions for Mr. Yassin. That now that he has highlighted the different GBV cases that we're witnessing in the community as traditional healers, we want to know how the Traditional Healers Association has been addressing some of these challenges in terms of if maybe someone goes to them and they have these issues that he has mentioned, how do they as an association or even as individuals, how do they in their different capacities handle these particular issues within the community?
Ebintu byenjogeddeko okusookera ddala aba disitulikiti oba Mr. Mazinga ne kabinenti ye basobola okuba nga balondesa olukiiko oba okulondesa olukiiko nga violence y'amaanyi obanga ebizibu ebyo bingi nnyo nga mulimu n'okutta abantu oba kitwanisa okusaddaaka abaana kaakati ne balonda nga baagala abasawo omusawo ayinza obbakulira kale bwe tutyo abasawo bannonda ne mpitamu ne tutandika okuba nga tukola ku nsonga eyo ne tuteekawo oba ne tuteekawo ekibiina ekyo ekikulembera nga nze kikulembera ne tutandika okuba nga tulwanyisa ne tutandika nga tutandika mu kusomesa twasookera ddala mu kuwandiisa buli muntu wa musawo wa kinnansi yenna nti bw'oba nga ogamba nti oli musawo olina okuba nga tukuwandiika kati bwe tumala okukuwandiika ne tusobola okuba nga tukulondoola okola otya ebibyo okola otya abantu obayisa otya ebintu obitambuza otya bwe tukusanga nga olina omuze gwonna gwokola oba omuze gwonna ogukwogerwako nga tutuuse ewuwona buli kimu abantu bwe tubabuuza wabaawo abatidde kubajjukira engeri oli gyaba nga basawo ng'ate nange ndi musawo kiba kitegeeza nti oba mukabe mukyalawo oba mwana abajja kunneesiga kuba nze abamanyi nja mutaasa nti oli ne bw'anaamululoga oba muyikinga ajja kumuyamba kati nga batandika okutubuulira buli kimu singa twakusanganga oba bwe tukusanga ng'olina byokola ebitali bituufu kyetukola tukukwasa abannamateeka era ne tubannyonnyola butya bwokola ebintu ne bakuvunaana era tukutteko bangi be tuvunaanye abalala abeerimbika mu kubanga beefuula abasawo b'ekinnansi bwe batyo twabakeberanga bwe twabasanganga nga beerimbika nga tubakwata tubateeka mu mbuga z'amateeka kale nabwe gutyo abantu abeerimbika mu nsonga y'abasawo b'ekinnansi batandikanga okudduka okusenguka mu lwengo nga badduka beeyongerayo bavaamu kuba bamanyi tugenda bakwata kuba tumanyi we have experience tumanyi tulina experience okusobola okumanya omutuufu n'omukyamu kakati twabakwatanga abalala ne badduka n'ekirala twatwala obuvunaanyizibwa nga tukolekera wannamu ne disitulikiti okutegekanga emisomo nti ku buli disitulikiti ku buli gombolola oba kye bayita paalishi okuva ku paalishi ne twambuka sabu kawunti nga tutegeka emisomo nga bwe tusomesa abasawo bwe tubayita bwe tubasomesa butya bwe balina okubihevinga butya bwe balina okweyisa mu bantu butya bwe balina okukola ensonga butya bwe balina okumanya abaana bwe batambula n'abakyala bwe babakwata na buli kimu tugenze tubasomesa nga bagenda bayiga abo ababa balina omutwe omugumu nga tubakwasa b'amateeka mu Luganda bagenda bavaayo kyova olaba nti kati okuva kati emyaka 5 enkola ezo ezaali ez'okusaddaaka abaana enkola ezo ez'okukuba abakyala okulwana n'okuyomba byonna bagenda babikendeeza era kati byafuukidde ddala bitono kubanga ennamba zaffe tuzirekayo nti bw'osanga obuzibu ku kyalo kwerosi oba n'osangako omutawaana n'osanga omusawo yenna ng'alina kyakola ekikyamu tukubire tujja kujja tumukwasaganye kale ne bwe gutyo abakola obukyamu bakendeera era baviirawo ddala abalala bonna tugenda tubatereeza mu layini mpola nga tukolaganira wamu ddala n'ekitongole kino ekya FIDA kuba nakyo kituyamba okutegeka n'okusoba nga kitegeka emisomo okusobola okusomesa butya bwe balina okwandulinga abaana n'abakyala nga tukolagera wamu ne disitulikiti ne ba CDO bonna nga tukwatira wamu tusobodde okuba nga tugenda tutereeza Lwengo mpolampola nga tujjamu abo bonna abatasobola kuba nga bayisa bulungi abaana weewaawo.
I just have 2 more questions for you. But before Doreen comes in to interpret, I think we'll just applaud Luengo for doing something that I've not seen being done in very many districts in terms of bringing the traditional healers together, educating them, sensitizing them, but also they themselves taking the initiative to go out into the community to be able to gain the trust from the community and also deal away with the different characters. Okay, so Doreen, could you please translate, and then we'll have a few more questions for Mr. Yassin, and then we'll have the CLV come in with their experiences on what they see on ground.
Okay, so Mr. Yassin says that with the support of the district, they are able to form this association, and under this association, they do have a register where they register each and every traditional healer in Luengo. This has helped them oversee the activities or the work that these traditional healers actually do, and has actually prevented gender-based violence. Says 5 years ago, there were so many human sacrifices, especially when it came to children. But since they started this initiative, they have since reduced, as well as domestic violence in families. He also says that they've also taken it upon themselves to sensitize their fellow traditional healers at parish level. And now that they're working together with FIDA Uganda, they're actually going to intensify it. And and lastly, he says that at every parish, he leaves his number, and should someone actually be treated in an unjustly manner by a traditional healer, or if a traditional healer is reported to be involved in gender-based violence, for example, criminal offenses like rape and what have you, they always contact him. And because he's their leader, people actually tend to trust him. And when they do get these perpetrators of gender-based violence, they're handed over to the authorities, like the police, such that these criminal matters, or these criminal offenses are prosecuted.
Thank you very much, Doreen, for being very generous with the translations. Mr. Yasin has mentioned a lot to do with what they're doing within the community, but also there are different collaborations with FIDA Uganda. And I'd like us to move to Mr. Humphrey, who is our CLV on ground. For those that do not know what a CLV is, these are community legal volunteers that we train with FIDA Uganda. These are passionate people within their communities that we equip with knowledge, skills to be able to handle cases within their community, because we know that the first point of justice, or even what access to justice means for that vulnerable person in the community, even down there in Lwengo, is just being able to know that their neighbor close to them can actually handle their case. So FIDA Uganda has a network of community legal volunteers across Uganda that are our foot soldiers, really. They are eyes and ears on the ground, and they're able to mediate cases, refer cases, they're able to offer basic legal advice. So we brought Mr. Humphrey on the call to be able to relate to us what he sees on the ground, the realities of GBV cases that he has handled, but also the community attitudes and how case management looks like at groundwork. And I think it comes in very handy, especially that Mr. Yasin has set for us what culture really looks like at the ground level in Luengo district. So Mr. Humphrey, if you could just unmute and tell us what types of GBV cases have you seen that closely relate to culture at the ground level, at the grassroots level?
Thank you, Madam. The GBV cases that happen here in Lwengo, first of all, we have got some imbalances whereby here in Lwengo, women or girls are not allowed to inherit property from their parents. And these are the cases that we always handle here in Lwengo. You find that a parent dies, maybe he has not made a will, and the relatives don't want to give girls property of their parents. Secondly, the GBV cases that happen here in Lwengo, the cases that we handle, in most cases, men mistreat their wives by beating them, by not allowing them to take share in case they produce some crops. They don't want them to have a share of the products they have produced. And these are the cases that we handle, which is unfair for the women. Thirdly, men are very harsh to their wives. You find a man sending a woman out of the house. Maybe they've picked a quarrel, and he sends away the woman, which is just unfair. Then the cases that we handle is that some men do practice what we call polygamy. They marry so many wives, and the moment he has married a new wife, he doesn't want to take care of the first wife. And maybe if they've produced children, you find that he ignores the children, the whole family, and this is actually what prevails in the Lwengo district. Lastly, women are oppressed. Women are oppressed. You find that most parents don't want to send girl children to school because they say girls are going to get married, and in such instances, in some families, they don't want to send girl children to schools. You find that the girls are treated unfairly. Basically, that's what I have to say, the experiences that we have in Lwengo, and there are even others. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you so much, Mr. Humphrey, for really expounding on that. Most times it is very easy to sit and assume that this is what people are going through, but it's such quite an it's such an eye-opening experience that you have told us about. And I'm just curious to know, how have you been handling these issues? But also, could you also tell us how most of these challenges are influenced by culture? Or are they just general?
Mm.
Are there some that are specific to culture, or are there some, or all of them are just general? If you could just paint the picture on that.
All of them are attached to culture. For example, the problem of inheritance. That's, of course, it is influenced by culture. By culture, they say a girl should not inherit from the father's property, from the parents' property. That's actually culture. Most of them are attached to culture. They have that culture of not educating girls, that girls are going to get married, and so they don't have to be sent to school, which is actually a problem to girl children. Most of them, of the problems, are attached to culture.
And how have you been handling these issues
Actually,
at your level as a
this
CLB?
Yes. We are addressing these issues by sensitizing communities. We go to communities, we hold meetings with LOC ones, LOC officials. We sometimes we refer we work with the partners, government officials like police, like a probation officer, the CDOs. We also engage them. We mobilize them as groups in groups. And actually, when we meet them, we address the issues. We go to churches and get a platform of talking about the issues so that the issues do not perpetuate. We also sometimes we even, if cases which are complicated that need legal advice, we refer them to FIDA Rengo, which actually intervenes by taking some clients to court because they are technical and they can actually assist in such interventions.
Thank you so much, Humphrey. And one of the things that I've been hearing throughout your intervention is the different collaborations that you've been doing with FIDA Uganda, with the churches, with the culture institution. So we're going to come over to you, Doreen, to shed light on why institutional engagement is very important, especially if we're looking at combating GBV that is influenced by culture.
Thank you, John. And these partnerships are quite important. It's important for FIDA to always strengthen these partnerships because you realize that these institutions always hold influence over the people. So if we have the chairpersons, the traditional healers, we know for a fact that we have been given a platform to sensitize the rest of the traditional healers under his leadership. That when we are given a platform in the churches on Sunday, they are able to listen to us because their leader has given us that platform. So it is always important for us to collaborate to make sure that GBV is combated. And also these platforms actually avail us with an opportunity to train the elders themselves. If it's like in traditional cultures and all, it gives us a platform to train them on gender rights, on how best we can integrate customary mediation with formal legal frameworks to bridge these trust gaps, because people trust them that much. So it's really, really important for us to always strengthen these partnerships, but not just with cultural and religious institutions, but also with other partners. Like, for example, with the Office of the Administrator General being fully operational in Masaka, we know for a fact that the issues relating to inheritance and how much women's inheritance rights have been violated, it will be addressed. Because before people were very, very skeptic about going to Mbarara or Kampala, but now that the office is operational in Masaka, we know that the intermeddling is going to reduce. We know that women's rights, when it comes to residential holdings and principal holdings, are going to be actually protected. They're actually going to go and make sure that the distribution of the estates is legal, and it's no longer one that has been, I think I should say illegal, because it has been illegal. Yes.
Thank you for sharing, Doreen. And I'd like to bank on your legal experience, but also I know that as an implementing partner in Wengo that has worked across the different institutions such as the culture, the local government, we want to know what challenges come with advocating for women's rights within a deeply rooted cultural context.
I think the biggest issue here, I should say, is power. Power being, we can look at the visible power that these people actually have control over the resources and over the people. Perhaps, let me say that I'll use the example of the LC1 chairpersons, because they hold the power. You go to a certain village and maybe for a locus mediation, and as the LC1 chairperson is giving his opening remarks, you will hear him say that much as FIDA has come, I have the final say. So still, you realize that power that he has is not necessarily coming from his position, but also stemming from the culture. Because you realize that Luengo is highly patriarchal. We realize that most of the decisions that are made are actually made by men. Whenever we have outreaches, you realize that when women come, they'll sit at the back. They won't even sit at the front as long as they are men. Or even when we have like radio talk shows and the topic is gender-based violence against women, you will have men being the callers and not the women. So all that, I think, reflects power. Now, that takes us into the invisible power, that because of these norms, because of the culture and all, women believe that they are secondary citizens. As long as men are there, they will not speak. So I think that is really a challenge, that we are dealing with women that are vulnerable, but still they do not have the power, to make decisions. Their voices are silenced because of the culture. Because even all these people that sit in these particular positions that we always leverage on are still culturally influenced. Even if it's a woman, you realize that much as she's a leader in that particular sub-county, you realize that she still believes that a man is superior. Recently, we had a training of women leaders, and some of them were from the cultural side. And when you interface with them and you ask them, okay, how best are you actually supporting these women in realizing their rights? They say, no, my job is just to be a senga. I have to tell them how marriage works. No, how can you tell me that you're going to leave your marriage because the man is beating you? It was your fault. You did something. So you realize that they hold the positions to actually influence, to make decisions that will protect the women, that will enhance access to justice, but they're still not doing it because they're culturally influenced. So I think that is those are some of the challenges that we face as we implement this project in Luengo.
Thank you, Doreen. And you have really expressed on the power issue, which is something that I've also seen as a feeder staff in upcountry. Some of the times when we go for sensitizations, you realize that mostly it's the men coming for the sensitizations. And even when the women come, they prefer to have like one-on-ones, and if it's like a public space, they'll probably not speak up. So there is that timidness that comes with the mindset that because men are here, this is this. There's one thing that I've also always talked about in my circles is that why is it that when we're putting out chairs, you'll see that the men come and sit on the chairs, and then the women are very quick to sit down even when the chairs are available. So there are those different subtle things that women do or men do that really tells you what the community perception on culture is, but also on the power differences. And you have really, really enlightened us on what power structures look like. And I'm thinking, do women actually have power? And what does that mean if in terms of access to resources? Because we know that they need the land, they need to work, they need somewhere to earn an income. So I think that is a question that I will give to us to ponder. But we have highlighted so much, even from Mr. Humphrey's session, on really how culture has the visible conflicts that culture has had with human rights. And we would like to hear from Mr. Yassin, because oftentimes we see that culture and human rights are usually in conflict, and people do not believe that there could be a space where culture and human rights can coexist. So I'd like to ask Mr. Yassin, is that even possible? Are there those positive cultural values that we can cling on to promote the rights of women and girls?
Obulombolombo bungi nnyo obulungi era bwe babuusa amaaso obukozesebwa oba busobola okukozesebwa okukuuma abakyala n'abaana. Mu bulombolombo obwo obwaffe bungi, naye abasinga obungi babutemerako ettaka oba babubikka. Tebaagala bwogerako oba tebaagala bukozesa, kubanga baagala kukola kusinziira ku kye baagala bo, ku kye bafunamu nga bo kye beeyagaliza ng'abasajja. Naye ng'obulombolombo bwe buli bungi. Akalombolombo akasooka akasobola okukuuma omukyala n'omwana, ffe tugamba nti our sisters sometimes they say that all our grandsons, all our sons bonna babeera baana. Kati bonna babeera nga baana babeera batuyita bajjajja. Kati jjajja toyina kubanga oyisa omuntu yenna obubi aba muzzukulu waffe, tumuyita muzzukulu waffe. Kiba kiraga nti omuzzukulu ffe ne bwe tuba tuli mu kulya mmere nga tuba tulya ewaffe nga tuli mu kulya, abaana be basooka batugamba, abaana be basookeddwa ddala okusookebwa ddala okulabirirwa n'okulya. Ako kalombolombo muffe. Era tugamba omwana yakulembera omulala n'addako. Ako kalombolombo. Ffe tulina akalombolombo akagamba nti omukyala ewaka ye mukulembeze owookubiri. Tumuyita vayisi. Ye vayisi w'omu maka, yakulembera, yaddirira. Omwami w'atabeera y'alina okuba nga addako, era ebiseera ebisinga buli kimu kyonna akikwasaganya kyenkanyi n'omusajja. Kati akalombolombo kagamba nti omukyala omukulu oba mukyalawo gwe n'omwami ebiseera ebisinga mwenkanankana mu nsonga zonna ze mba mulina okukwatako engalo. Mu buwangwa ekyo bwe kiri. Ekyokulala tugamba nti abakyala tutera obatwala nga be basookera ddala ku lw'ensonga nti ebiseera ebisinga tubayita bamaama bonna. Era ffe buli mukyala tumuyita maama mu bulombolombo bwaffe, nti kubanga yazaala bonna, omusajja yenna oba buli muntu yenna, omukyala oyo omukyala y'aba azaala. Era ne mu bwe tuba twogera mu lulimi lwaffe tugamba nga tusomesa abaana nti buli mukyala yenna ayitibwa maama, buli musajja ayitibwa taata. Mu Luganda nti omukyala ono buli kaseera n'omwana babeera maama ono yavaamu buli kimu, ateekeddwa okukwatibwa obulungi era n'aweebwa amaka bulungi nnyo. Era nga tugamba nti omukyala bw'oba ogenda kuwasa, kyandibadde kirungi ng'ogenda okuwasa omukyala omulala osooke weebuuze ku mukyala omukulu. Omukyala omukulu akkiriziganye naawe. Singa aba takkiriziganyiza naawe, kitegeeza nti oba totuukiridde, togwanidde kuwasa. Kitegeeza nti oteekeddwa kumala kukkaanya naye. Naye ebiseera ebisinga baabamu bakola bukozi nga bwe baagala nga tebagoberedde. Ekyokulala mu bulombolombo bwaffe tugamba nti omwana omuwala ateekeddwa okugabana n'omwana omulenzi. Omwana omuwala agabana ku bintu bya kitaawe. Era naffe tukkiriza nti omusika aba asikidde omugenzi oba taata we oba maama we, oyo yasinzaako 10% oba asinzaako katono. Naye omwana omuwala mu buwangwa aba ateekeddwa okugabana. Era waliwo ne betugamba abaana bawala basikka ne basikira bassenga baabwe. Aba alina okugabana ku bintu bye byonna naye bo olw'okuba bakozesa olukujjukujju nga bakozesa amateeka agataliyo mu buwangwa baagala nnyo okugamba nti abaana obuwala tebalina gabana entalo ne zibeera awo ne baagala okukozesa kye bayita witchcraft ne baagala ennyo okuloga bannaabwe oba okulemesa bannaabwe okusobola okuba nga bafuna ebintu nga balina buyinyi mu lugube naye nga tebayitidde mu kalica kuba kalica omwana omuwala agabana ate era mu kalica tugamba nti omwana omuwala alina okusoma era alina okuweererwa tewaliwo kalombolombo konna kagamba nti omwana omuwala tateekeddwa kusoma naye olw'okuba oli ayagala kulya mpuuta ye tayagala kuweerera awo n'alyoka yeekwasa nti obuwanga buganye oba kino ne kiri beerimbika bwerimbisi weewaawo.
I'm very particularly happy that you have mentioned that within your particular culture, women are allowed to inherit property. I will hand over to Doreen to give us a translation in a minute, and then I have a question for Mr. Humphrey.
Mr. Yassin says that indeed there are certain cultural norms that are positive, such as distribution of property to all children, regardless of sex. They have one that says that children eat before other people, which is able to reflect the children's right to food. He also says that in their homes, they believe that a wife is the vice president or vice chairperson, and where the man isn't, she is able to make the decisions. And he also says that in their culture, should a man desire to marry another wife, he should first seek consent from his wife before actually going ahead to celebrate the second marriage. I think that those are some of the cultural norms that he shared.
Thank you so much. And what this is highlighting for us is that not every cultural value or every cultural attitude is actually negative. Some of them are positive norms that exist to also create safe spaces for women and children. And we are happy really to hear that some of them exist within the Luengo district. Mr. Humphrey, we have had Mr. Yassin expound really on what some of these the positive cultural norms that exist to create safe spaces for women are. I would like to hear from you if you've seen any positive shifts in attitudes and behaviors over time within the community in terms of where these particular values are concerned, and has that really greatly improved or advanced gender justice, so to speak?
Yes, there are some changes that have taken place here in Luengo as a result of our intervention. Actually, first of all, we have seen women now. We are engaging them in groups so that we can empower them in order to see that this actually change, such that even women can be engaged in income generating activities and even have money. They can even have, they are even empowered to save. By saving, they can even have money to get property which can act as collaterals that they can even access loans from banks. Women are also have been also empowered by sensitizing them at village level, in churches, and actually they have been empowered. There is a tendency that such norms that men are superior than women, and in such cases you find that women face they face such injustices. Actually, we have had so many meetings with women, engagements with women, so that they are actually come at the forefront in order to get rid of such injustices. Actually, we are doing some work through feeder. We get transport and go to communities to sensitize these women so that they can also come up as women, and actually that kind of inferiority complex goes away. Yes, that's what I can say.
Thank you so much, Humphrey, and also for your great work within the community. I think one of the things that we are noticing is that when it comes to changing attitudes and really, yeah, attitudes towards culture, especially the negative culture norms, and what role does the community really play in challenging some of these norms? And we understand that some of them can be long term, really, but what can the community do, Mr. Humphrey, in terms of getting us there and creating the safe spaces that the women and girls do deserve?
What the community can do is actually creating awareness among the in the community, so that that trend can change. Community also can be sensitized to take action in such instances, so that if such vice happen, they can even report such instances in authorities, like reporting in LOCs, police, so that the vice can be changed. Yes.
Thank you very much. We have seen how informal justice systems can actually help us promote gender equality within our spaces. We have seen how even FIDA as an institution is supporting with the advancement of gender justice. And Doreen, I'd just like for you to highlight that how we can really work with cultural leaders like Mr. Yassin, how we can work with informal justice actors like Mr. Humphrey, and also the local the district governments. How can we work with them to ensure that some of these things are actually put into law, and not just rumors of actually a girl has to inherit property? How do we have policies around that? How do we ensure that the partnerships and the collaborations that we're having among the leaders also trickles down to the community?
Thank you, John. I think FIDA, one, we can strengthen these partnerships through a constant capacity building sessions. For example, when I spoke about the training on land and property rights, it was specifically for women leaders. That was women councillors, women leaders on the LC1 committees, the clan leaders, strictly so that we are able to build their capacity, and because they're the ones that normally interface with people at the grassroots. So I think that we can continue doing, because remember, they are not lawyers, they do not have any legal knowledge. So it is our mandate to make sure that we were able to give them this knowledge in order to build their capacity. But further still, I'd like to note that through our partnership with the Office of Administrator General, a user committee was duly established, and one of its objectives is to continuously build the capacity of our leaders in Luengo, because of the inheritance cases that are quite high, and since they're the ones that normally mediate these matters, or the ones that normally render the legal advice, we found it pertinent that a quarterly meeting is held by the Office of Administrator General, so that they train them on the succession laws, considering the fact that we have an amendment to the Succession Act. And we're also working on bylaws for 2 sub-counties that tend to have so many gender-based violence. violences that are perpetuated by traditional healers. In this particular sub-counties, many of them are not under the association. Like Mr. Yasin said, that some of them, they just want to be rogue. They don't want to be supervised. They want to do things. And many of the things that they do actually affect our women and children. So we are currently working on bylaws that will be able to be used in those sub-counties. But again, we are supporting the Traditional Healers Association with the amendment of their constitution to take into consideration all those things that Mr. Yasin has duly mentioned, where we speak about the gender-based violence. I know they have a particular provision that talks about the offenses that will not be overlooked, but one of them being gender-based violence is not actually provided for. So it's something that we want to be provided for. But I also am aware that they have a practice called Kwambulula, that is a culture, I think spiritual cleansing. We would like the constitution to specifically provide for the spiritual cleansing to be gender sensitive, that let the men spiritually cleanse the men and let the women spiritually cleanse the women. This will actually reduce on the sexual gender-based violence in Luengo, because we have so many children and so many women being raped and defiled because they have gone to be spiritually cleansed. So those are some of the things that we're actually working on to make sure that they are not just words, but they're actually implemented. And because we are working together with the chairperson, we did agree that every time he convenes his traditional healers, will be given a platform to continue sensitizing them on the laws. I know that most of the time, people tend to consider cultural norms over the legal practices, and that's why we see so many women forsaking legal redress and being cornered into customary or cultural resolutions that tend to disadvantage them. When you look at inheritance, custody, and also being able to train our elders, to train our traditional healers, our church leaders, I think to actually really go a long way to make sure that whatever we are discussing will actually materialize into something more tangible. Thank you.
Thank you, Doreen. I would want to start from where you had stopped, where you were talking about sometimes the people evading the legal redress and then opting for cultural redresses. And I'd like for us to note that over time, it's really very hard for us to ignore culture. So I want to come over to Mr. Yasin and ask, how can we incorporate culture into our systems for access to justice? Like, for example, if a GBV survivor comes to a traditional healer or they opt to go for a cultural redress, how are we as culture leaders and traditional healers able to support them in a way that does not violate their rights, but also ensures that they have access to justice? Mr. Yasin?
Kati maama asubire nti bamumpulira bulungi. Obulombolombo buno bujja kusobola okuyamba nnyo abakyala nti oluvannyuma lw'okusomesa abasawo bano ab'ekinnansi n'abo bonna abasamize abakola enkola eyo okusikiriza mu buwangwa n'ennono oba abajjanjabi nga bakozesa eddagala ly'ekinnansi, nti oluvannyuma lw'okubasomesa ennyo nga tugenda tubayitamu n'okugyamu abo abakyamu abeerimbikamu obwerimbisi, tugenda kubanga tusobola okubanga tubasomesa basobola okutegeera era basobola okubanga nabo bennyini batandika okulwanyisa ebikolwa ebyo byonna ebyekko oba ebibi. N'ekirala nti singa tubazuula oba ne tuba nga tubasanze nga bakola ebintu ebikyamu, tujja kuba tukozesa enkola ey'okuba nga tubatwala ku b'amateeka oba ku poliisi. Era tujja kukolera wamu ne FIDA, era tugenda mu maaso n'okukolera wamu ne FIDA ne gavumenti ne disitulikiti okubeera nga singa bajja ne beebuuza nga waliwo ebintu ebitateredde bulungi mu bo ne bajja mu kwebuuza mu basawo eno okugeza najja n'agamba nti waliwo omuntu oba obbawanga ntwalako ekibanja oba abaana aganyu basomesa ne batuuka mu maaso eno kuba batukkiririzaamu tujja kuba tubasindika mu b'obuyinza kati ng'abafida okusobola okukwasaganyizaawo tiwamu nga tukolaganira wamu tujja kuba tubasindikayo bo ne basobola okuba nga babawabula oba ne basobola okutuukiriza obuvunaanyizibwa obw'amateeka n'okubasomesa nti wakati nga tubasindika mu bafida nga tukolera wamu okubasindika mu bafida ne gavumenti ne ku poliisi tujja kusobola okubeera nga tukendeereza ddala era nga tumalirawo ddala enkola ez'okunyigiriza abaana ab'obuwala abakyala n'abaana abato.
Webale nnyo ssebo. I'll come over to you, Mr. Humphrey. We want to know, based off of your experience at the grassroots level, what is that most important change that you think is needed in community attitudes to reduce GBV?
Actually, the positive change that is needed at the grassroots is economic empowerment. There are even some government programs that are targeting the community, like there is a fund for women. Actually, we can help these women access this fund so that they can actually uplift their welfare. Economic empowerment is needed, and which can help these women actually uplift their socio-economic welfare. We can actually even integrate these women. We actually actually encourage men, some men, to join these women groups so that actually it is integrated. The community is integrated. Women and men can be encouraged to form groups that can help them have a forum of how this actually can be handled. Yes.
Thank you very much, Humphrey. Doreen, I'd like for you to enlighten us on some of the advocacy strategies that FIDA Uganda in Lwengo has used to engage culture leaders, but also you have stated expressly some of the things that you're doing to reduce the temperature, so to speak. Could you really tell us what advocacy strategies you have done and if they are working?
Thank you. One of the advocacy strategies that we have used is engaging of the videos, because we know that they really interface a lot with the cultural leaders. And so we're able, one, to build their capacity, to build their legal literacy when it comes to inheritance rights, but to also make sure that they are aware that they do not have actually a right to distribute, whether they are, because some of them actually cultural leaders, that they do not actually have a right to distribute. So I think an internal memo was sent out to that effect, and I think it has really improved. I think it was sent out in February, and right now when we look at the number of inheritance cases that were usually reported, saying that there's an influence of CDOs, we can really see that they have duly reduced. But we have also been able to still engage the DCDO in his absence, because he supervises them. And he also sits on the committee of the Traditional Healers Association. We're able to engage him on some of these issues that the traditional healers were purportedly doing, that were perpetuating gender-based violence. And he was able to give us a platform as with the chair of the Traditional Healers Association. And that's when we started discussing the amendment of the constitution as well as the development of the bylaws that have since helped. I think because the chairperson was able to go back and speak to his people. So we believe that it's actually already helping because many of them actually come for our community awareness sessions. We have also been able to engage, like I said, with the Office of the Administrator General. So we believe that much as a user committee was established, I think it is quite pertinent that to note that this user committee was non-existent. So to know that there's now a user committee that will duly be sensitized on a quarterly basis, but also be used as a platform to raise some of the issues that people are facing down there when it comes to inheritance rights and inheritance cases is something to really appreciate. And also we have information desk, or what we call a succession help desks that sit at the district that are convened by this particular office, that's Office of the Administrator General. So we now see that people are moving away from the customary redress mechanisms to more of the legal, because now we're bringing the services closer to them. And those desks were not existent in the first place, but they now are there, and people are able to come. They sit on a quarterly basis, but people are able to come and actually engage with these particular offices. And it has actually quite helped a lot. But we have also, because we constantly train our leaders, our elders and all, we have seen them actually put into practice the things that we have taught them. We have seen them put policies in place. We have seen them put measures, take particular measures to protect our women. For example, when we have like cases at the grassroots, we know that there are not going to be interferences, because some of our cultural leaders that serve as the LC1 chairpersons have been able to put out public notices that they are no longer charging for referral letters and stamps, because before they would actually charge our women, and that way they would be influencing them to settle culturally. So we see them now actually referring them to police, to the health centers, to feeder. I think it has really helped to close that gap, because there was really a big gap. And the reason why I keep talking about it is because these leaders, these LC1 chairpersons, these counselors, all these people are actually, they double as clan leaders, as cultural leaders or elders. So if we're able to have them in our spaces and they're able to go out there and put it and implement some of the things that we have taught them. Like, for example, that the waiving of the charges for referral letters and stamps, I think we're actually really making a huge impact one way or the other. I think for now that is it, because the rest of the initiatives that we are taking are still being worked on, and we are yet to actually see the realization of their impact. But for now, we can say that we are making good progress. Thank you.
And thank you so much, Doreen. We have about 5 minutes to the plenary. So, ladies and gentlemen, prepare your comments, prepare your questions. We'll be answering them in a few minutes. Doreen, I'd like you to think about Luengo District 5 years from now. And the reason why I'd like to think about that is because I'm asking you, what would success look like 5 years from now, really? 5, 10, 15. Okay, let's put it at 10 or 5. If cultural leaders such as Mr. Yassin, if the local government, if community volunteers, but even if as us, as FIDA Uganda, civil society organizations, what would the success for us working together to effectively prevent GBV within our different communities look like, for example, in Luengo district in 5 or 10 years? In about 2 minutes.
I think for me, it would look like legal land ownership by women, because you realize when you look at Luengo and our context being patriarchal in nature, and all, our women do not actually own land. They do till it, yes, but they do not own it. They can't even get loans, because even in inheritance cases, the people that actually distribute the estate are male clan leaders or clan relatives. And with that, they might give a woman a portion, but she's not allowed to sell without their consent. they have the say as to what she actually plants on the land. So I don't think that looks like ownership. So for me, I feel like 5 years from now, success looks like empowerment for that woman in Luengo, legal land ownership, the ability to actually get money of her own in form of a loan without necessarily seeking the consent of her husband to help her with his own, land agreement. The reduction in inheritance cases, it would look like people actually pursuing legal distribution of properties by acquiring letters of administration. It would look that way. It would look like the rate of GBV actually going down, the number of domestic violence cases being reduced. It would look like each of the stakeholders understanding the role that the other plays, because at the moment, we believe so many police officers do not actually understand the work that traditional healers do. The moment they hear traditional healers, they're already biased. These are the people that sacrifice the children. These are the people that sexually abuse our women and children. It would look like people actually understanding the work or the role each one of us as duty bearers plays. I think that is what would look like. That's what success would look like for me in 5 years in going.
Thank you so much, Doreen. I have picked out your nuggets. I've also picked out the urgency of your voice, and it feels like you want the dream realized as soon as possible. And we hear you regarding that. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the time for us to make comments, to ask questions. You can utilize the chat, but you can also raise your hand, and I'll be able to see you. While you're raising your hand, I have a comment here already in the chat box that I'm going to read out loud. And I think this goes especially for you, the feeder team, that Julie, consultant, DLC, says that this is a very insightful conversation. It is great to see the partnerships you have nurtured with the grassroots. Okay. With nurtured with grassroots formal and informal actors to work collectively in respect to on this aspect of traditional norms and how they impact GBV. So she says, "Well done, FIDA Uganda." I see two hands. Gloria, I saw your hand up first. Please unmute and state your comment or question.
Thank you so much, Joanne. And thank you so much to our speakers. The conversation is very insightful about what culture norms look like in Rengo and how they continue to affect women and girls in the area. So my question is around the children. I've had a chance to be part of a reflection around issues affecting Rengo district and also the implementation of this particular project. And something came up around children in conflict with the law in Rengo. So I wonder whether this particular issue has any backing by traditional norms, cultural practices that are continuously pushing the children to maybe commit the crimes. I don't know if there's any correlation between the two, and I would love to hear from Doreen on that particular aspect. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Maybe Doreen, you could proceed to answer that, and then Yakani will come to you in a few.
Okay, thank you, Julie, for that question. I would say that it has played a role, but partly. With many parents abandoning their roles, the children actually just end up on the streets, so they end up being in conflict with the law. When we interact with most of them, they actually tell you that they were being abused at home by their own parents. It's funny that they never say that stepmothers, or they say my mother, my father, he beat me, he bat me. So I would say that culture maybe just plays a small role, and that is when we are looking at the traditional healers that do not fall under the association, the ones that we call rogue traditional healers. They're the ones that maybe normally tell these parents who are put into abandon their responsibilities, that perhaps when you treat the child like this, when you ban the child, when you do this, that is when you become rich. So the children just end up running away. But most of the time, it's just many of the parents, they engage in alcoholism and drug abuse. But I would say culturally, it's just a really, really small percentage.
Okay, so besides culture, what I'm picking out is that there are actually other major influences that cause GBV within our society. So we have a lot of work to do, ladies and gentlemen. Yakani, I see your hand is up. Would you like to unmute and pose your question or comment?
Yes, a very good evening to everyone outside there. My name is Yakana Isaac Charles. I appreciate the team and the platform. Mine is a comment basically on the cultural norm that influence gender-based violence. However, before the comment, even I would like to know if there are some policies or that govern the cultural institution. I'm very glad that Logbarakare, they are also condemning, or they have even started condemning some of the cultural norms that are influencing gender-based violence. However, it is also good to know if we have some policies in the Uganda Constitution, the 1995, that govern these cultural institutions and some of those cultural norms. Then, however, we know indeed gender-based violence most of the time people say it only affects women are mostly the victims, but however, it is also good to know that men are also victims of this gender-based violence. But now, how can we ensure that men and women, they are also inclusive in the fight against gender-based violence? For us to curb these biases, I suggest that it is good we as community legal volunteers, other entities, that it is good now for us to start transforming. Maybe it is good to include this thing into the curriculum. Children needs to be taught about the negative impact of gender-based violence right from schools. By the time they grow up, they're already well versed that this thing like this, it is bad. Then secondly, most of the times we are now focusing on women empowerment. Then in one of the sessions when I had in one of the school, some of the boys who had, when one of the ladies were introducing themselves that they're women-led organization, they work normally for women and girls. Then they were like, now who is working for the boys? Meaning to some extent, it is like now the boys or the other men are also being neglected somewhere. Now we empower this lady, and tomorrow this lady is going to get married to someone who is not empowered. Do you know that, let us be prepared that once this empowered ladies got married to an empowered man, just know that this domestic violence are going to continue in their homes, meaning there is going to be misunderstanding which is going to come. So there is need for us that at least let us continue to empower and even train men to be male champion. And if we train 10 men to be a male champion, and this male champion, this man can go and even started influencing some men outside there that beating a woman, it's not right. Maybe restricting a lady, stopping a lady from to go to work, it is bad. Doing this thing to a woman or to a girl, or like saying that we don't need to educate a girl, it is not the right thing that we are supposed to do. Meaning, as we continue doing this, let us also be more focused on how we can bring in men who can be trained to become male champion and influence other men outside there in our society. so that if you want to indeed that maybe in 30 years, in 5 years time to come, that at least let us reduce this domestic violence to zero level, at least maybe some other issues we need to work hard that at least we influence some men who can also be in position to influence others. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Yakani, who is also a CLV, by the way, in the West Nile region, which is also a region that has a lot of cultural influence. There are so many things that you have put across. I will try my best to digest it enough for that different panelists to be able to answer. Thank you so much for your comment on what FIDA is doing and also on what the webinar has achieved for you. Yakani speaks of men being victims of gender-based violence and how can we as a collective address that. I am going to assign that question to Humphrey coupled with the question on male engagement. How are we bringing on board men to be able to support the women in terms of promoting gender justice? And then he asked a question pertaining the constitutional provisions of culture in our laws, really in our constitution, but also in our laws, which is a question I will direct to Doreen. So we'll probably start from Mr. Yassin on answering the question on we've seen also men being victims of gender-based violence. How can we also support the men as well as we support the women?
Ab'obuwangwa era tusanga okusomozebwa kunene nnyo nga tusanga abasajja nabo be bagobye mu bibanja era tusanga abasajja ng'abakyala babeefuulidde nga be balina powers ez'amaanyi oba nga be basinze ku bakyala ku baami baabwe. Kale abaami n'obasanga ng'ate bwe bamala okukula ebiseera ebimu nga bafuuse bakadde. Tusanga nnyo issues ezo nga bamaze okufuuka abakadde nti abaana nga bakuze bamanyi okwegatta n'ennyaabwe olw'okuba ne bamaama baabwe olw'okuba nti mu buvubuka wano oluusi taata ono ayinza okuba nga teyabayisa bulungi oba nga alina by'ataabawa nga oluusi agenderedde oba oluusi nga teyalina busobozi bwabyo. Kaakati abaana abo bwe bakula ne maama ng'akuze kati taata ono oluusi ng'aweddemu amaanyi kuba ebiseera ebimu bataata bagenda ne bawasa nga bakulu ate ng'oluusi bamaama batomu. Kati maama atanaggwamu maanyi n'abaana bakuze bamanyi otuuka ne badda ku sayidi y'abaana baabwe ne batandika okuyigganya taata nga bamugoba ku bibanja bamugoba ku ttaka bamusumbuwa. Naye era nga bwe nagambye tubasanga era issues ezo zibeerawo nnyo nga baddukidde eno ewaffe, naye tubawa amagezi nga tubayambako okubakwasaganya wamu ne FIDA nti bw'obatwala ku FIDA ejja kusobola okumulwanirira naye tekola ku bakyala bokka ekola ne ku baami. Naye lwakuba nti abaami abiseera ebisinga baguma nnyo babeera beegumya nnyo tebaagala kuwaaba mubabalaba nga abagenda okuswala ebiseera ebisinga babeera bagumireyo ne basanga okusoomoozebwa. Naye tubasaba era bwe tubasomesa tubagamba singa wabaawo keesa eyo yonna oba abaana bakunyigiriza oba omukyala akunyigiriza oba abooluganda b'omukyala nga in case goli in position ey'okubeera nga gwonyigirizibwa, jangu bw'oba ozze n'otubuulira tukukwasa aba FIDA ne bakutandika okukubuulira butya rights zo bwe zigwanidde okubeera, era bamala okukubuulira rights zo ne bakuyambako okutwala mu mateeka era ne bakukwatirako okulaba nga naawe osobola okuva mu buzibu obwo oba okusobola okuba nga naawe osobola okufunamu. Mpati mbagamba nti waliwo agambye nti abasajja tubayambye tutya. Abasajja babayambira ddala naye abasajja be bataagala kuvaayo. Naye nga FIDA esomesa enkya n'eggulu nti singa oba onyigiriziddwa ne bw'oba musajja bo weebali okubeera nga babatwala bakulembeza ekigambo kye bayita gender balance. Bakulembeza nnyo ekigambo kye bayita gender balance weewaawo.
So, Mr. Yassin, the summary of the response that the traditional healer has been able to give us is that he has highlighted that most of the times they have created awareness for the men, also to tell them where to report their cases, what kind of cases to report, but also that where they can refer the different cases. But he has also highlighted something that is very important when it comes to serving the men that are survivors of GBV, that they fear to come out and report the issues. So he highlighted that as the major challenge regarding that. Doreen, I'm going to give you time to respond to your question, but also to elaborately really translate what he has said. Your question was on constitutional provisions and really legal provisions on culture in Uganda.
Thank you, Joan. So he was saying, just like you said, that the main challenge with men is that they feel embarrassed to come out and actually seek for redress, and yet organizations like FIDA Uganda are always sensitizing and always remind them that their doors are open for them to be supported in one way or another. But it's the gentlemen or the men that do not actually want to come out and be supported. That was basically the gist of his submission. And when it comes to my question, I would like to really emphasize that our constitution provides for culture. It is actually pro-culture. And when you look at objective number 26, it says that culture and customary values which are consistent with fundamental rights and freedoms, human dignity, democracy, and the constitution may be developed and incorporated in aspects of Ugandan life. It further says that the state shall promote and preserve those cultural values and practices which enhance the dignity and well-being of Ugandans. So when you look at that objective, you do realize that the constitution does not in any way negate the importance of culture. However, it is fronting the positivity that we get from culture, the cultural norms that we've been talking about, the positive ones. And even when you look at Article 2 of our constitution, it is to the effect that, of course, the constitution is the supreme law of Uganda. And if any other law or custom is inconsistent with the provision of the constitution, then the constitution shall prevail, and such custom shall, to the extent of the inconsistency, be void. So still, when we go back to our harmful norms, realize that they do not have any standing in the work that we do or in Uganda as a whole. I am aware that we have the Traditional and Complementary Medicine Act of 2019 that is supposed to govern and regulate the incorporation of traditional medicine into the health sector. But with my interaction with traditional healers here, they told me that they are aware of the existence of that act. However, they believe that it does not really provide for the work that they do, because most of the work they do is divination and all, and yet this one just speaks about the local medicine, the herbal medicine. Yet there's so much more that they do. So they believe that it does not really speak to the work that they do. And they would be glad if the same is actually amended. I think that was my question, Joanne. However, I think you had requested Mr. Humphrey to also speak on male engagement.
Yes, thank you for your response. Maybe before Mr. Humphrey comes on, I just had a small addition to what you were, to the constitutional provisions or the laws and policies in Uganda that promote culture. We also have Article 37 that gives the citizens the right to belong, to practice, to profess, to maintain, to promote culture. But I'd also like to bring our attention to the Uganda National Culture Policy, which is a policy that was issued in 2006 by the Ministry of Gender, that talks about the preservation of culture, the creative economy, and the different institutional support. So when you also get time, please look at that as well. So, Mr. Humphrey, we had a question on male engagement. How do we bring in the men in our advancement of gender justice?
Yeah, it is true. the other part, what the other participants said, that men should also be brought on board because they are also sometimes they also sometimes face GBV. Actually, men can be brought on board in different activities. For example, here in Rengo, we actually help men and they are involved. For example, if we are forming a group of women, we actually encourage men also to register and are included in the group. Then there are cases for men that we handle here in Irengo because they also experience GBV, and actually we help them and sort out the problems if they are actually facing the problem. Um, they are juveniles, mainly they are boys who are convicted, and actually, if such boys are convicted, we FIDA helps to facilitate in terms of transport in order to go for rehabilitation in a remand home, and FIDA helps to give transport to such juvenile offenders if they face that problem. Lastly, we know cultural norms here in Rengo mainly affect girls and women. So even boys end up not going in schools and actually end up going on streets. And actually, we help them to give them legal advice. FIDA helps to give them legal advice. There is advocacy, and actually, this is what I can say about male engagement.
Thank you so much, Humphrey. I do not see any more hands, so I will just read two comments that I've seen in the chat room. We have one from Mr. Charles. He says, thank you for the very insightful webinar and thanks for blending the law and culture in addressing the most pressing issues in our community. That goes to you, FIDA. He also says he works for a local community-based organization that is called Brighter One Uganda. It's in Kiriandogo district, Kiriandongo district that provides access to justice. And he asks if FIDA Uganda has any office or a structure to support referrals and other engagements in Kiriandongo, and he has been kind enough to leave his email for us to get in touch. I'll just ask the comms team to capture that. In terms of an office in Kiriandongo, we currently do not have one there. The nearest would probably be the one in Luero, which is quite far, but we work with all justice actors across Uganda. So if you're talking about referrals to police, if you're talking about referrals to health centers, if you're talking about referrals to whichever service provider, we can get you to that service provider because we have a network of referral pathways. I do not see any more hands. If there is any, you could just proceed to unmute. If there is none, I will give our panelists a minute or two each. Okay, I will give our panelists a minute or two each to give us their final remarks, their closing reflections, and also, their closing remarks generally. We'll start with you, Doreen.
Thank you, John. I think mine is really a vote of thanks to those that have actually logged in to listen to this webinar. I think culture is really one of those topics that should really, really be discussed if we are to actually make an impact in our communities with the work that we do, because we do have the law, but we realize that sometimes it's difficult for us to use the law because of the different contexts, the different contexts that we interface with. So it's actually really pertinent for us to always use the mechanism of social justice to always make an impact. I also want to applaud the chairperson of the Traditional Healers Association, for being really a fast-forward person. The first time we interacted with him, we were actually impressed. We didn't know what to expect, but really applaud him for the work that he's doing to ensure that the gender-based violence that is often perpetuated by his fellow traditional healers is actually addressed and Luengo developed for the better. So I just want to say thank you, and that we look forward to much more insightful dialogues with him for us to make an impact in Luengo. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll have the remarks from Mr. Yasin, and then we'll proceed to Mr. Humphrey.
Bane nsanyuse nnyo okubawuliza mwenna, mwebale mwenna ababadde leero ku mukutu wano, abasobodde okwerekereza ebiseera ne mubeerawo. Ne neebaza abafida bonna omulimu omulungi gwe mukoze, kubanga muzze mutunoonya eyo yonna mu kyalo, nga mujja buli kaseera mugenda mulongoosa. Mpozzi akatalekeka ngamba tugenda kulwana bwezizingirire mu myaka gino egiddako, okulaba nti tusomesa era tukwatira wamu ne gavumenti n'abafida, osomese abasajja bonna n'abakyala bonna n'abaana bonna, abo bonna abatagala kutwala baana ku ssomero, bonna tubanoonyeyo yonna gye bali, omu ku omu tulabe nga tubakwatako. Abalala bonna abeesibye mu busawo obw'ekinnansi nga tebabusobola era nga tebabukola era tebabuliimu, naye nga banoonyezaamu okubba abantu ssente zaabwe, kubanga badde bakozesa enkola nti bw'oleeta ssente zino ngenda kuwa obugagga, leeta ssente zino nkuwa obugagga. Nga nze chairman mbanoonya bonna mu Lwengo abakola enkola eyo, nti gwe obugagga obugabira banno tobwagala. Lwaki gwe tobwegabira? Lwaki oyagala nnyo obugabira banno? Kitegeeza obeera mulimba. Babbi abantu abamu ne beetta n'okwettabula ne bagwa n'eddalu. Wabula kuno omwaka oba gino emyaka tugenda kulwana wamu n'ab'amateeka n'abafida okulaba nti abo bonna abeerimbika mu nkola eyo okuleeta violence ey'okubayo okubba abantu yonna nga tubakwata, tubateeke mu mbuga z'amateeka, tubanoonye, era tukolere wamu ne FIDA esobole okubeera ng'etukwatirako wakati mu kusomesa amateeka n'okuyambako abo bonna abasanga obuzibu, abakyala n'abaana. Wabula mbasaba ne gavumenti gikubirize yongeremuko amaanyi mu kitongole kino kuba kikoze omulimu gw'amaanyi okusobola okutukolera ebintu ebirungi n'okujja nga batuyamba. Naffe abasajja batuyambye nnyo, abaana babadde baagala nnyo tutwalako ebintu, nga baagala nnyo okutuwa obutwa tuffe batwale ebintu byaffe, naye batulwaniridde ebiseera bino, era kati naffe tulinako obwogero lwakuba nti nkubiriza abatakimanyi nabo beeyo ne FIDA nabo bakitegeere bakwatire. Kale bannange mbeere bulungi.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yasin. Maybe we'll have a 1-minute translation from Doreen, and then Humphrey, you can come in.
Mr. Yasin was really appreciating FIDA Uganda for the work that they do, for looking for them as traditional healers, but also going deep down there in the villages to ensure that access to justice is enhanced. He pledges his commitment to working with FIDA to ensure that people in Luengo, including men, are actually able to have their rights realized. And he believes that our partnership will be fruitful. And still, he also encourages listeners to always look for FIDA Uganda, to always seek out their services, because they always help the people. That was essentially it.
For me, I'm very grateful for this opportunity. Actually, before FIDA came to Luengo, there were a lot of GBV cases, and actually, local leaders had a very big challenge of handling such cases. But when FIDA came, actually, some local leaders were relieved of the burden. I'm very grateful for this forum. And actually, I'm going to encourage my fellow CLOVs that are working in Wengo, and I'm going to tell them that I've had a very good opportunity of this session and about the subject. And actually, we are going to do a lot of things, as you said before, that we want to see a change in Wengo about GBV. We are promising that actually, as CLOVs of Wengo, in 5 years to come, there will be a very big change as far as GBV is concerned. Thank you very much, and thank you for being a good facilitator to facilitate this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. You have heard from your panelists. This conversation and webinar has been able to help us achieve the different conversations from the grassroots levels. We've been able to hear from a traditional healer, the chairperson of the Traditional Healers Association in Wengo, in terms of how what cases traditional healers have been handling, but also how they are creating safe spaces for women and girls. We have also had from the community legal volunteer in Wengo who offers first-hand experience in dealing with the community, and we've had the legal perspectives that have come through from our legal officers. I think the beauty about this conversation is that we've had a wide range of panelists, but also of the audience, and I think going forward, we have something to work on during our advocacy journeys. Thank you so much for being a great audience. Thank you so much for our panelists for making the time. We do apologize that we did not have the other one panelists. They were a bit engaged, and that's why we were able to run with the three who have held the fort so far. And it was amazing to have this conversation with you, ladies and gentlemen. Have a good rest of your afternoon. Feel free to exit. Thank you.